Hatred within a team can spike so much to where you find your own teammates deplorable. Now, when I say this, I mean in both a work environment, but also on a personal level as well too. It ends up seeping into the personal opinion of how you view a teammate or a coworker. Now, I'm sure many of you have worked a job and noticed someone's deficiencies, right? Maybe they aren't doing something as efficient that they should be able to do, or they just haven't noticed how to do it, right? Like, say if you're working in a convenience store and someone ends up not handing the change correctly to someone. I notice this a lot in a lot of grocery stores or just convenience stores, to where they'll hand you the change on top of the dollar bills, right? So it'll be the change here, and then they'll kind of use it as a carrier basket, and they'll have the dollar bills underneath the change. And it's like, okay, well, when you give that to a customer, the first reaction, at least as a guy perspective, right, is that I try and put my dollar bills in my wallet, but the change is in the way, so I have to put the change back into my hand and then put the dollar bills into the wallet. Well, if you're a cashier, maybe you should actually think about how the change is in interaction with the customer. And it's just like, okay, well, maybe you should put the change in the palm of that person's hand first and then the dollar bills afterwards, so that they could grasp onto the change and yet put the dollar bills into the wallet and then put the rest of the shit over into their pocket. Anyways, small nuances like that, right? Small little deficiencies in which you notice people don't perform at what could be considered as 100%, or at least closer to 100%, right? And it doesn't have to be that example either, right? It could be something as simple as, say, a mechanic not knowing how to torque on bolts onto a car, right? Like, say a tire. You're supposed to torque bolts onto a tire by going in a cross pattern. That's how it works. Say if there are 5 bolts on a tire. Well, you're supposed to do a cross section, so one furthest bolt from the other, or nut from the other, and then you go in a cross pattern, and that actually makes it to where the tire is centered properly and is pushed against the entire frame of the car properly. Well, if you do that incorrectly, then there are small little nuances and vibrations that can appear if you don't do that. And so it's small things like those in which maybe someone who has perfected a job, or is just very experienced at a job, knows about those small nuances. And if you're someone who can give criticism, and you can say, hey, okay, this is kind of what you need to do. Here are the things, like say you're a person who is experienced at the job, and you end up training someone new. Well, you can say to them, hey, okay, this is what you need to do. These are all the small things that you should probably try and look out for. And training a new person, obviously, they aren't going to remember everything about the job, but it's still that you're trying to reach out and trying to instill in them good habits, right? And say that the criticism doesn't reach them, and you end up reaching out to them again, and you say, hey, you're doing this incorrectly. Here's kind of how to do it in a better way, right? And they still don't fix that problem, then it becomes something annoying, right? It becomes a problem in which you see within your teammate. And then maybe there's also the chance that you're just bad at giving criticism, right? There are people that are just not that suitable to give criticism or to give feedback to someone else, because they don't know how to place themselves within that other person's shoes of someone who has done something incorrectly, and then to be able to say, okay, well, how would I want that feedback onto me? So criticism is a lot harder of an idea to actually execute correctly than I think a lot of people give credit towards when someone does give correct feedback or a way to give criticism in a more productive manner. Now, then there becomes the ideas of, even the little shit bothers you, right? Even the small nuances of how someone does something or how someone says something is eventually what bothers you and what gets into your bones, right? Like, say if someone doesn't ask nicely for something, right? Like, this is this is one of the simple things of someone asking, like, hey, can you do this? Or, hey, could you help me out with this? Instead, they say, hey, go do this, and we need this over at this time, because of these customers. And sometimes that can bother you, right? Someone doesn't ask nicely. Although it is something that you need to do, it's as though someone is demanding it of you rather than asking it, right? And so maybe these little nuances can bother you, right? And this translates over into esports. Now, I know you guys are thinking about, okay, well, how does this transfer over into esports, or how did this even relate to esports? Is that eventually, as you get into an esports team, you end up having to deal with these same problems that people have dealt with all their fucking lives in any particular job within the world. Is that there are these deficiencies that you notice within someone else's work that is upon your team, and also problems giving criticism or taking criticism when these deficiencies are talked about. And so as you start to discuss these type of deficiencies, it ends up starting problems even outside of the game, or even you may realize of problems outside of the game that start affecting in-game. Maybe someone doesn't clean up their mess in the kitchen and you're in a team house. Well, suddenly that seeps into in-game, and it might not be that particular thing which offsets a teammate. They're in game and you do something incorrectly and they just fucking explode on you. it's something not that big of a deal. Like, say you didn't ward in a specific spot and it's in a scrim and a jungler comes and ganks you in the bot lane. It's like, okay, there's no need to entirely blow up and just say it's the end of the world. You're a bad jungler. Like, you should have known to ward over here because we needed that vision coverage because of the bot lane and they're playing an aggressive early jungler. So you should know what to do in that specific circumstance. It's like, no, that's okay. Sure, that is part of the problem, and in that specific game, yes, you should be able to give criticism towards them, but it depends on how harsh you are with that criticism. And suddenly all these other factors that have built up throughout the time of you being on a team together has just exploded into this one singular moment of when they decide to blow up on you. And so that's when you can see that outside problems start to affect the game. When someone blows up on you on one particular issue that isn't necessarily that big in the grand scheme of things, that's when you know that there has been a culmination of problems that have appeared but only have manifested within this singular issue in which they just decide to bring up. And this can be seen in instances like Especial on TSM. If you guys remember that TSM vlog where Reginald still on the team, right? And Wild Turtle is in the van with the rest of the TSM, and they're all discussing the problems of the game. And Reginald ends up blowing up on Wild Turtle, and Especial tries to defend him during that time. And so Reginald just ends up blowing up on Especial, and just all these problems end up coming up. And you can see in that moment that it's not particularly about the game in which they're discussing. There's like this meta problem in the background, and that any realistic person, that could take themselves away from the situation would then realize that it's kind of unfair to try and push all of this shit on at one moment rather than just discussing the particular game at hand where Wild Turtle had made a mistake. So X Special ended up having problems with Reginald famously, which then led to him being off the team and going on to another team. And so circumstances like these are where you get the deplorable teammate, right? And maybe that deplorable teammate is Reginald, or even still in a backward sense, it's also X Special, and that he's so deplorable because you hate so many different aspects of this person to where now you want to surface these problems, but only on one specific issue, which actually doesn't even tie into the entirety of his character or his problems as a teammate in-game and out of game. You have someone like Dardoch on Team Liquid. Okay, it's obvious that they had problems within the game, and everyone could see that they had problems deciding on what lane to play towards. It seemed like Team Liquid as a whole, their game plan was somewhat to play towards Piglet in the bot lane, but with problems going on within the jungle and mid lane, you had this weird discrepancy of, okay, well, should we have Dardoch carry or should we have Piglet carry? And then we have this late game monster in Phoenix to be able to carry later on, but they could never decide really on what style that they wanted to play. And so Dardoch, he famously just kind of blew up on the rest of Team Liquid and wanted to discuss the problems within Team Liquid themselves, and especially with Loco Doco, and Dardoch having a problem with his coaching. And you come to this problem of these deplorable teammates, right? Dardoch being the deplorable one because him giving criticism, it seemed like he didn't know how to give criticism, and he would just argue for the sake of arguing rather than having a solid point and wanting to get to a resolution and a end state in which he wanted the team to come back better from and to progress further in. Instead, he wanted to just argue for the sake of arguing against Loco Doco in the famous documentary Breaking Point. And so you have these particular moments in time to where you can see the deplorable teammate, and you can see when a teammate, their problems transcend the game, and that's when they become truly deplorable. And the difficulty of giving criticism is what makes someone deplorable, in the sense that not only do they have an opinion about the game or how they want to work the game, it's that they don't know how to give that opinion out in a good enough way, and in a way that is valuable for criticism within the team. And with that, you also have these teams that have difficulty even giving criticism in the first place. Famously, TSM in Season 8, currently that we're at, is that Mithy blew up on the rest of the team and said, we aren't discussing our problems. It seems like everyone just wants to coast along and not discuss the problems within the team. And if we don't do that, we're never going to progress as a team. And so you have situations like that, situations to where teams usually in the beginning of their inception, whenever they get their roster together and all these minds are coagulating together and trying to decide what style that they want to play, everyone seems very timid in offering their opinion. And if no one offers their opinion, then suddenly you have this disconnected team that don't know exactly what they're trying to do or what they're trying to accomplish. But if you are the person that gives criticism and you give it in a particularly untasteful way, then suddenly you are the deplorable teammate. And it's not that you notice people's deficiencies and you are able to point them out, but it's that you point them out in the incorrect way. And so these are the circumstances in which teams and teammates need to think about when they join a team, and how to give criticism and how to not be that deplorable teammate, both in giving criticism or in being the person that has all these small nuances that they don't seem to notice themselves and don't know how to fix. And if you are the person that doesn't know about your own problems, someone eventually is going to reveal those problems, and they might do that in the incorrect way. And that's not to say that your problems don't exist, but it's just that you were too late to realize those. And that in itself is also deplorable, and that's what makes a deplorable teammate.